shall we? Let's check it out. Okay, welcome into Rob Schmitt tonight. I'm Bob Brooks filling in for Rob. So what if I told you that the Speaker of the House, in this case it is Republican Mike Johnson, were to give a speech today where he said the United States is in jeopardy of losing our status as a constitutional republic. And I wonder if that perks up anyone's ears, makes you think, oh, wow, we better wake up, or hey, you know, once again, here's another politician in Washington saying the sky is falling because another big election is coming up in November with the midterms. Well, I actually think it's the first one, hence why I'm telling you about this tonight. Now, I doubt his speech this morning is gaining a lot of traction in mainstream media. I doubt actually going to see any of these clips. But I feel like this is one of those moments where someone who is in second in the line of succession is trying to say, wake up. But not enough people will, and it'll be too late. And then before too long, you might be saying greetings, comrade, instead of hello, neighbor. So I want to walk through some of his speech today after a meeting with Republican leaders. Instead of talking about the policy that was discussed in this meeting, the Speaker of the House decided to go down this route instead. And that is basically highlighting the conversation that we began here last night, that there's a crisis on our hands with the rise of the Democratic Socialist of America, or DSA. So let's start going through it.
I believe everything is at stake right now. This isn't campaign rhetoric. It's not hyperbole. You see what's happening around America. I am often reminded these days of the writings of the founders, the warnings of the people who put together the principles that made us the greatest nation in the history of the world. They warned us against times like this.
So I will ask, what are those times? You know, what does the socialist campaign heavily on right now? Well, that, of course, is money. It is affordability.
I think the affordability crisis continues to be the highest priority for the American people, and our focus will continue to be drive down the high cost of living, make life more affordable.
Republicans aren't just failing to address the affordable crisis, they're making it worse.
Now we have an affordability crisis magnified because of the war.
We have won because New Yorkers have stood up for a city they can afford.
And what do they say that they're going to do? What has been so effective for the DSA? Well, free stuff, right? That is exactly what it is.
They promise you free stuff. There is far more beneath those promises that even some of these people do not understand themselves.
Right, so the free stuff, it gets you in the door, maybe even gets you their vote. But what are we really talking about here? Where has that mindset on the left already taken us? Well, all I got to do right now is just point to the numbers and the statistics. Let's run through them. 9 out of the 10 most expensive states, they are run by Democrats, while Republican-led states are the most affordable. That is a fact. That's the way it is. In California, the average home price is $1.9 million. In New York, it is over $2.9 million for a house. How about building one? The average production timeline in California is 49 months. Nearly twice the average that you have in Texas. It takes 4 years to build a house in California. How is that even possible? How did it get so bad? And how about the cost of raising a kid in our country? Look at Hawaii. It is the most expensive state to raise a small child, with annual cost for the first 5 years reaching more than $40,000. The next two, Maryland, Massachusetts, falling at $36,000 and $34,000. Talk about education. Let's talk about Maine. In the bottom 10 states for educational achievement, citing the fact that 75% of students failed to reach proficiency in the latest national exams. So you notice what we're doing here. All these stats that I'm listing out for you, that I'm showing you, they're not just local to New York and California. It is a combination of many blue states. So I'm noticing there's a common thread here. It is left-wing policy driving them into the ground, because states, they have a choice. They compete. And now we're talking about going even further left. So far left that they're talking about starting to dismantle our institutions. Because now that they have had success, the DSA members, they're starting to feel, and I think you can all notice this, starting to feel a little emboldened. And they're speaking out more, and which is really just a litmus test before we get closer to November, just to see how far that they can push this envelope. A bunch of them are doing more interviews and talking about their plans now. And here's what one of them said recently about the Senate.
We just don't see the point of the Senate. Historically, it was meant to serve very wealthy people who owned a lot of land.
So would you like to abolish the Senate?
That's part of our platform, and we don't think that's extreme. We think it's a change that would help make this country more democratic.
Okay, and this isn't just some offshoot outlet. That was C-SPAN. This guy, he was even giving praise to the sickle and hammer, the Soviet Union.
So there's been a lot of propaganda since the Cold War and Red Scares in the United States, where very powerful people in the United States felt threatened by the politics we represent. So that's why, a lot of people never learned about the history of democratic socialists in the United States.
Okay, so Speaker Johnson, he had a response to that today. I want to get back to his speech. Now, here was his take. As you would imagine, it's much different than praise, like what you just heard. He said he was recently giving a tour on Capitol Hill, and then he asked everyone this question.
I pointed to them, as you may have heard me reference this often. I think of it a lot. Why did Congress put "In God We Trust" above the rostrum of the Speaker's podium there in the center of the House? It's inscribed in the marble, as you know. You can't miss it when you walk in the chamber.
That's right, it does. And he said the reason why that inscription is there, "In God We Trust," is because of the Soviets.
This was put there in 1962, and it says in the Visitor's Guide, it's been published for many years, it said Congress voted to place that there as a rebuke to the Soviets because of their philosophy during the Cold War. What was the philosophy of the Soviets? It's what Carlos just outlined, same philosophy of Cuba, the brutal dictatorship.
This was in direct defiance of the Soviets. And then the Speaker, he elaborates even further.
That there is a huge distinction between us and the Soviets' philosophy. Communism, Marxism, socialism, all this begins with the premise that there is no God. It's a totally different philosophy.
They don't have a God. They have government. And yet I just showed you a clip of a guy who was doing media hits on C-SPAN, campaigning for the DSA, saying, well, the Soviets, the DSA, we're just misunderstood. And the reason why, because of rich people. Here's more from the Speaker.
They want to remove the president. What they also want to do is abolish all borders. They don't want any borders. They want mass amnesty granted to anyone who can come onto our shores without exception, even for terrorists and hardened dangerous criminals. Okay? They don't want prisons. It's in their platform. They want to remove the carceral state, they said. No prisons. They don't want to fund the police. This is not a game. Everybody needs to understand. These crazy little mini Mamdanis who are popping up all around the country, they are a danger to you and your family. This is not a game.
So I know we've been talking about this topic a lot lately, but when you see the Speaker of the House, he goes on national television and he chooses to use his time to give a speech like that, I think we should all take note. It's pretty important. It is not a game at all. Everything the Speaker just listed out is in the DSA literature, and many of them are on the ballot now in November. Okay, and tonight on Finnerty, a new way to end so-called birth tourism. Senator Jim Banks, never mind. That is the wrong print there. Somehow that got into my teleprompter. Peter Navarro, Trump's administration senior counsel for trade and manufacturing, joins me. Now, I didn't know if that was some kind of stinger that Finnerty was continuing on the same thread there.
I can go there if you want, because it's the craziest thing that we haven't been able to crack down on, but we're working on it. It's just nuts.
It is nuts, Peter, the kind of stuff that they are putting out there, and they're getting more and more emboldened. So I want to talk.
Dangerous nuts, by the way, Bob. Yeah, go ahead.
10 of the most expensive states, Democrat-led here. Talk about this, how we got here, and where you think we're going, and really the messaging to combat what they are trying to sell to the American people.
Well, let's start where we're going. Today's prints for the Consumer Price Index indicates that Trumpnomics is working splendidly. The trend is down. Where we've been going for over a year is to bring inflation and the trend down from the 9% it hit during the Biden years because of their profligacy. I think, obviously, it's a great irony that the Democrats and socialists who want to make affordability the cornerstone of their political capital basically have the 10 states in the union minus Florida that have the worst problems with affordability. The thing that always, I think, should resonate with the American people is this, Bob. President Trump wanted to stop 20 million illegal immigrants coming into America, stealing our jobs, driving down our wages, changing our culture, changing our political system. And he did that literally on day one. Now, what has happened on the housing affordability issue has been a true Trump miracle, because if you take those people and you put them on planes, buses, and trains and get them the hell out because they're illegal, yes, housing demand falls dramatically, and so does the housing problem in terms of prices. And we've seen that beautifully. And what we haven't seen, though, Bob, is in the sanctuary cities, the Chicagos and the New Yorks and the Los Angeles of this country, where it's been more difficult to solve that problem. We haven't seen housing affordability get as better as it is in the rest of the country. That's all you need to know. I mean, this is a choice. It's going to be a choice in November. And if you want affordability, you're going to vote Trump and the candidates that Donald John Trump endorses in the House and the Senate, because we have to take and hold the House and the Senate. Look, I went to prison, Bob, because we lost the House of Representatives. Those clowns started throwing out illegal subpoenas and weaponizing the process. And I'm telling you, we cannot let the Democrats gain control of this country again, because they'll give us inflation, they'll give us a weaponized justice system, and everything in between, never mind the defund the police and all this kind of stuff like that. I'm in Washington, D.C. This truck where I'm in, spoiler alert, this is not a studio, it's a beautiful truck.
I'm sure it is.
Studio. This would be a dangerous place if it weren't for the National Guard here in this neighborhood, okay? This place is safe because Trump brought the National Guard to Washington, D.C., and now people are free to walk around the streets. You put the government in the hands of the Democrats, it's going to cost you more, and it could cost you your life, and everything in between is just as bad.
Well, as the speaker pointed out, could cost us our constitutional republic here. And I don't think, he just by accident, he chose to talk about that today. I think something happened in that meeting, and they said, oh, boy, we got a real problem on our hands. We got to address it. Something else I want to talk about involves Iran, but our economy, Peter, as a whole. Yesterday, the president, he was proposing a 20% toll on all the ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. Today, he backed off on that. This is what he posted about after some conversations. He said he decided to replace the 20% United States reimbursed fee with trade and investment deals on the various Gulf states we'll be making with the United States. Talk about what that could look like, what that could mean, but then really all the other trade deals the president has cut and how these are going to take time here to come to the United States till they come to fruition.
Well, let's think about a couple of things. First of all, the Strait of Hormuz has been historically a choke point. But what we're seeing right now is an epiphany among the Gulf states and the rest of the world that Iran, as long as that regime stays in power, is going to pose a threat. So what we're seeing in Trump time, in real speed time, we're seeing the world diversify away from the Strait of Hormuz as a way of tamping down on any inflationary pressures that the mullahs could otherwise exert on the world economy. So that's number one. Number two, it's just like in NATO, the European allies are free riders. American taxpayers pay the biggest bill in NATO. It's also true that in the Middle East, security there, the free riders there are the Gulf states. It's the Saudis, Kuwait, Qatar, and on down. And what President Trump wants to do, I think, is to have the Gulf states be infinitely more responsible in a joint way with the United States for security of that region. And one way, obviously, to do that is through investment, which defrays the cost of us having to be the policeman of the Strait of Hormuz. So I think it's really important. This whole conflict with Iran has really crystallized the danger and also the ways that we can work around in a way which will get us to economic prosperity and permanently lower oil prices. And the Gulf states, they're going to have to share the burden. And one way to do that is through investment, just like NATO has to share the burden by having the NATO countries pay more. And by the way, where are the British and the French and the Germans and the rest of Europe, which get the oil from the Strait of Hormuz, to light their lights? Why aren't they helping more with this issue? President, he's got a big chess game going on behalf of the American people, and we have to win that chess game. It's as much as a strategic and thought game as it is bombs. Donald John Trump is winning this war, but we got to get everybody involved on the ally side to make sure that regime doesn't do what it's been able to do in the past.
And what they set out to do. And I think, Peter, that so many world leaders, whether it's here in the United States or across Europe or across the Middle East, have said for decades, something's got to be done about Iran. You got to give President Trump credit to having the courage, the administration, to actually finally go do something, not just talk here. Peter Navarro, we got to leave it there. Always a pleasure. Good to see you.
Take care, Bob.
Appreciate it. All right, the Trump administration ordering ICE to pause vehicle stops after multiple shootings. So, gotta ask this. Are they bending to the open borders left? We're gonna explain what exactly happened today and how we arrived at this. All right, stick with us.
Federal agencies urge every family to have an emergency radio. During any disaster, electrical power may get cut. The emergency radio gives you the vital information you need. Newsmax wants you to have the Dynamo Emergency Band Radio. It doesn't need batteries and works in any emergencies. It retails for $30. You can get it with the free offer. Call or go online and get the emergency radio today. Your life may depend on it.
Kevin Sorbo here, and I have an important message to share. The government needs more money, your money. If you owe the IRS back taxes, they can garnish your wages and levy your bank accounts. They can even seize your retirement or take your home. Don't let the IRS target you. Call the professionals at Tax Network USA. Their tax lawyers and enrolled agents are experts in powerful programs that may even help you eliminate your tax debt.
Call for a free consultation or visit tnusa.com.
My dad had never been in better shape. Then he had a stroke and passed away. But he had life insurance. So even after he was gone, he was still taking care of us. Ethos.com, 10 minutes, 100% online.
Check your price today at ethos.com.
Almost half of women runners say safety is their biggest concern.
Majority of us have to constantly change routes, start times.
Instead of thinking of my pace, we worry about being followed, unwanted attention, and stuff that is simply scary.
Imagine this banana was a less lethal device, capable of incapacitating an attacker, letting you get to safety.
At Byrna, we don't sell bananas. Go to Byrna.com to find how you can always safely make it to the finish line.
Now, tirzepatide for weight management is available in a dissolvable tablet. It's not the injection and doesn't offer the same strength or clinical evidence as the injectable form, and results will differ from the injection. But for patients who don't want shots, this tablet option is worth exploring, understanding results will differ from the injection. Tirzepatide tablets are a prescription that starts with a telehealth evaluation by a licensed physician who reviews your health history. And if it's right for you, they prescribe it. This might be worth a conversation.
Here's Chris Cunahan with the Leaf Filter Gutter Report.
From blizzards to downpours to windstorms or heat waves, no matter where you live, Leaf Filter keeps your gutters clog-free year-round. Schedule your free inspection today. Call 833-LEAF-FILTER or visit leaffilter.com.
People always ask me how I stay ready. How I stay consistent. How I lock in when it actually counts. Again and again. It's the work you do before anyone's watching. They think I must be on something. Maybe. It's pure, it's potent. It's all me. Something that never lets me down. Armra. I'm on it.
If you don't think this is up, you don't know what it means to be an American. What, he used his Prius as a weapon at 2.5 miles an hour? That's just an excuse to shoot somebody. That's what's going on. These thugs want an excuse to shoot someone like they're patrolling the Warsaw Ghetto in 1941.
I said this a couple of weeks ago, that I would not be surprised if when ICE funding started up again, that we would start to see more civilian deaths.
ICE has become, under Donald Trump, an abusive and rogue agency that should be broken up and disbanded.
I highly doubt any ICE agents actively go out looking to shoot anybody. Look, Democrats escalating their attacks on ICE. It seems to be working. The Trump administration has now ordered ICE agents to pause most vehicle stops temporarily, unless it's for the worst criminal illegals. So in wake of the multiple fatal ICE-involved shootings of illegal aliens in Maine and Texas, this for so-called more training. All right, the ICE agents killing a 26-year-old Columbia national in Maine after he attempted to flee during an immigration enforcement operation yesterday. Now I got to show you a picture. The bullet holes located in the front of the vehicle. Now I wonder why that's the case, huh? Maybe because it was barreling straight towards an agent. Just a thought. Leftist antagonists descending on the scene, causing chaos, and that's pretty much all it seems to take sometimes. And now the administration seems to be bending the knee. It's confusing. The radical left now has veto power over interior enforcement. Maine Republican Senator Susan Collins, a Republican in name only, Rhino, and in a tough re-election battle, also revealing that she spoke to DHS Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen personally to tell him to pause vehicle stops, and it looked like it kind of worked. All right, vehicle stops, they are key to mass deportations. ICE uses them to get illegals off the streets, including the worst of the worst, because blue states, they will not cooperate. So if illegal aliens are allowed to shield themselves from deportation using cars, well, I got to ask this question. Why should any Americans continue to follow traffic laws, right? If you can't pull over illegals, then why should Americans be allowed to be pulled over if we're actual citizens? Kind of having a hard time understanding this one, even if it is just temporary. Simon Hankinson joins us now. He's a senior research fellow for Border Security and Immigration Center at the Heritage Foundation, along with Chris Clem, retired chief patrol agent at the U.S. Border Patrol. Pleasure to have you both on. So, Chris, just explain to me what you think is going on here with this. Am I reading this wrong? I know they said temporary, but why should we even stop temporarily?
Well, good evening. And I can tell you that I am a fan of this administration. I'm a fan of the secretary, but I disagree with any decision that takes the tactics that these agents and officers have been trained to do out of their hands. I don't care if it's temporary or not. Every vehicle stop, every encounter is handled differently. It's evolving. We're trained for that. You know what? I'm okay with additional training, but what next? We're temporarily pausing, for what's the worst of the worst or whatnot. This just adds more volatility into that agent's decision making every time he goes out there. If we're not going to make vehicle stops, are we going to go back to worksite enforcement? Are we going to go back to, serving warrants and kicking in doors? I mean, look, that was the problem on the front end. So we went to targeted enforcement, and, this happened tragically, but this is what happens when you encountered hundreds of thousands, and if not millions of people every year. You're going to have some of these bad situations. I don't like the fact that we had to shoot somebody, but you know what? That's part of the job when you're dealing with criminals.
I don't think any of us like the fact that somebody was shot, but you're spot on, Chris, that sometimes these things do happen if you flee in a car and you drive it towards ICE agents. Simon, your thoughts on this? And again, I want to be totally transparent because, Chris, I'll agree with everything you just said here, fan of the administration and what is going on. But even if it's temporary, do you think that's an issue?
Look, there's no one to the right of me on immigration except Stephen Miller and the border wall, but you got to win elections. Susan Collins is in a tight race. We need every conservative we can get when it comes to, a lot of different policies, not just immigration. So I can understand why they're taking a beat. Let's look at the tactics. Of course, we've got to enforce immigration law. We've got to deport, but we want to make sure that people don't get killed. That's not good for anybody. No one wants to shoot people. I don't know whether these last two shootings were people who were being targeted in an operation or whether they were accidentally in the wrong place at the wrong time. But it's pretty normal when you have a police officer involved shooting. They always take a step back and they do an investigation, figure out what happened, how can we do it better next time. So I don't see this as a problem. If Tom Homan takes some time to talk to his senior staff and look at what happened on the ground and make sure that it doesn't get repeated again, that's not a bad thing. But no, they can't give up on enforcement. They can't give up on vehicle stops forever.
Well, especially if American citizens are subject to being pulled over. So, Chris, I want to ask you, how could you do this maybe and not have this temporary pause? I know you just touched on it, but did it have to go this far, do you think?
Look, I don't think you have to pause. I'm just not a fan of stand downs unless you have a mechanical issue that's going to cause somebody. This is a tactic issue. Had to do with the actual agents on the ground there. It's one thing to get them training and train everybody else, but we should not stop doing our job and having to make decisions on, well, is this guy, got a criminal record or not? I mean, they know who they're targeting. They know who they're going after, but do not give people the opportunity to flee now, because we've seen this play out in the Border Patrol. Years and years ago, we had a pursuit policy that gave us a lot of authority. Then they stripped that down, and guess what happened? Every smuggler failed to yield and kept on driving, and we lost so many people. That's what I'm afraid is going to happen. Should not have paused it. Training is good, getting some extra training, but let the agents do their job, keep the mission, put on the gas, no pun intended there, but let's keep the foot on the gas to keep this job. And again, advise senior staff, advise the agents and officers to, take a breath, but do not take away the tools that they've been trained to use to go out there and do their job as the law allows.
Okay, we'll see how long it lasts. All right, a lot of illegals out there. Simon Hankinson, Chris Clem, we appreciate you both coming on.
Thank you.
Okay, the Trump administration, they are cracking down on trade fraud. There was a big news conference about that today, more than $1 billion recouped, involving a case of over $200 million in just gold jewelry. All right, details on that coming up.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.
When curiosity strikes about the everyday lives of your family, we're here with answers only your ancestors can provide. See their stories at Ancestry.
When people think of Life Act, they usually think of saving children.
We do see a lot of kids in the Hall of Saves, but it's full of seniors too.
It's hard to perform a standard maneuver on someone in a wheelchair or with fragile ribs.
We just got these.
Every senior living facility should have a backup client.
So did you get it out with that suction device? Is that what you got out with? LifeVac, yeah.
Go to lifevac.net or call 877-543-3822.
Hi there, I'm Dean Heskin, President and CEO of Swiss America. Most investors believe their IRA, 401k, and bank accounts are reliable and safe. But what if our economy becomes so dire that you're restricted from accessing your own money? The fact is that should your bank be in trouble for holding bad loans, the burden could fall on you to help bail them out. Even more concerning is that U.S. financial regulations allow banks to impose withdrawal limits on your hard-earned savings. But there's something you can do about it. Our team at Swiss America has a report called The Secret War on Cash. Learn how to protect yourself with assets that can remain outside the control of banks and other financial institutions. For over 40 years, Swiss America has been one of the most trusted metal firms in the country. So don't wait. Call or text the number on your screen today for financial peace of mind in these uncertain times.
The pain is gone. It's gone. I was wheeled in. I couldn't even move 5 feet without the wheelchair. I was in awful pain.
Are you able to get onto the bed?
I doubt it.
No?
We went through the whole intake interview, did the MRI, x-rays. I was awake through the surgery, came back to recovery. I was there for 10 minutes, and I got up and I walked.
Venati succeeds where others fail.
I wanted to have control over drinking instead of alcohol having control over me. I started with Or Health about a year ago. It put the brakes on that I had been looking for. I can drink less and say no, and it's the best feeling in the world.
Text Newsmax to 710-710 to learn more.
Hello, this is Franklin Graham. Samaritan's Purse is responding to the deadly earthquakes that struck Venezuela on the 24th of June, 2 back-to-back earthquakes. Hundreds and thousands of people have been injured. Thousands of people are missing. The people are hurting. Samaritan's Purse has taken a field hospital. We've got doctors and nurses, and we're responding right now to the people that have lost so much. We've taken water purification. We've taken solar lights, a lot of things. We need your prayers and we need your help. God bless you.
It's me, Ricky. You grew up with me. I am using Fatty 15 to get me to feel and look the best I've ever felt at my age. The C15 nutrient has been known to strengthen our cells and slow the aging process at a cellular level. I urge you to try Fatty 15.
Today, alongside the Department of Homeland Security and other federal partners, we are announcing an extraordinary enforcement milestone in a new frontier of fraud enforcement. That is trade and customs fraud. In less than 1 year since its launch, the Trade Fraud Task Force has officially surpassed $1 billion in criminal and civil recoveries, penalties, forfeitures, and charged losses. The Fraud Division and the Trade Fraud Task Force are laser focused on these schemes and will continue to bring the weight of the department to bring bad actors to justice.
Welcome back in. The Justice Department holding a press conference in Chicago highlighting the DOJ's largest ever trade fraud crackdown, as well as its sweeping trade fraud task force enforcement initiatives. This building directly on the task force launched last year, which has now surpassed $1 billion in civil and criminal recoveries, penalties, forfeitures, and publicly charged losses. The task force combating importers and others evading U.S. tariffs, misclassifying goods, they're falsifying the country of origin, undervaluing shipments, and using transshipment schemes, all to get around tariffs and what we just mentioned there. Colin McDonald, Assistant Attorney General for the National Fraud Enforcement Division at the DOJ, Andrew Boutros, the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois, both join us now. Both spoke earlier today. Colin, I'm going to start with you on this. So in your opening remarks, you said this $1 billion, just a baseline, that really this task force just getting started here. Talk about the work you're doing.
Yes, that's right. The announcement today really demonstrated our entrance into this new frontier of fraud, which is customs and trade fraud. And the American people may not know it, but every year the American worker and the public fisc loses hundreds of billions of dollars a year by international actors who exploit the American economy and flood our markets with different products and fail to pay the necessary duties that the laws passed by Congress require of them. This is a new focus of ours, in addition to all the other areas that we're looking on with respect to the fight against fraud. We're now coming to the fight against trade fraud and customs fraud, looking to ensure that the American worker is protected and that American companies can survive and thrive in the international market, and that we bring these bad actors internationally to justice.
Andrew, also want to talk about this. Your office has announced charges against multiple defendants in significant customs duty evasion schemes involving the false declaration of countries of origin for gold jewelry. In this particular case here, it puts you over the $1 billion milestone. This was hundreds of millions of dollars of jewelry. So when we say this isn't like just a little shipment going into some jewelry store on Main Street here. This is a ton of product coming in, and they're trying to evade.
Correct. The United States is the world's largest importer of goods. And so what we're talking about here is commercial enterprise conduct. We're not talking about people who are coming in from overseas, from Europe, or from some other country that wants to bring in some additional items, souvenirs that they may have bought in from overseas. What we're talking about are hundreds of billions of dollars with a B of imported goods that come into the United States, and that oftentimes come in through various schemes and methods that are either designed to avoid enhanced security review and audits, or that are designed to avoid tariffs and duties. And when it's done at this level of scale, then the fraud and the loss upon the United States can be extraordinary, like the figures that were released today, passing that $1 billion mark. But in addition, it's something that has really been emphasized today in today's press conference, which is the impact of these fraud schemes is felt on the mom and pop businesses. They are felt on American companies that are unable to compete on a level playing field. And many often end up going out of business. And there are many victims that I've spoken to, corporate small victims, during my time as an assistant U.S. attorney, who literally said that they were on the verge of turning off their lights for good and had tears in their eyes when they were talking about this. Companies that had been in existence for 30, 40 years, passed down from parent to child, and they were going to go out of business. And they needed us to stand in the storm for them and to step in and make a difference. So this is not a victimless crime. It is a real crime with real victims, and it deprives the government of revenue, and it hurts small businesses and American businesses as well.
Well, what the baseline of this here, you want access to the American consumer, our businesses, our economy. Got to play by the rules, and you got to pay for it. Colin McDonald, Andrew Boutros, we appreciate the work that both of you are doing. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, coming up, Supreme Court justices testifying on Capitol Hill today over security concerns as far-left threats to judges surge across the country. Now, Justice Amy Coney Barrett says she had to be given a bulletproof vest by her security detail that her son saw in their house. Talking about that coming up.
Is approved for the treatment of relapsing forms of multiple sclerosis in adults. Ponvory lowers the number of white blood cells, lymphocytes, in your blood. Usually, this will return to normal within 1 to 2 weeks of stopping treatment. Ponvory can increase your risk of serious infections that can be life-threatening and may cause death. Ponvory can cause your heart rate to slow down, especially after you take your first dose. Do not take Ponvory if in the last 6 months you had a heart attack, unstable angina, stroke, or other severe heart conditions, including certain types of abnormal heart rhythm. The most common side effects of Ponvory include upper respiratory tract infections, elevated liver enzymes, and high blood pressure. Starting treatment with Ponvory will begin with the starter pack. Ask your doctor about Ponvory or visit ponvory.com to learn more. By Vanda Pharmaceuticals.
While this banana may not save you from someone breaking into your home, Berna's banana helped one vet repel an intruder in his.
This huge guy, 6'5", 6'6", just barreled through my front door. I have my Berna and my Glock. I always go for the Berna first. I've seen enough death and destruction to last 2 lifetimes. Here is the perfect item I can have, feel totally safe, and no, I'm not going to kill anybody.
At Berna, we don't sell bananas, we sell peace of mind.
Where's the admission desk at your hospital? You may need it sooner than you think. It's the middle of the night and you, your spouse, or your child is sick, high fever, can't keep anything down, and getting worse. Now you're waiting in the ER, and everyone gets seen before you. And when I finally see you and order prescriptions, you still have to wait for your pharmacy to open and hope they have what I prescribed. This is the medical emergency kit. It's stocked with essential medications, including amoxicillin, generic Z-Pak, and ivermectin. Now you have the right medications when you need them. And it's why I and so many of my colleagues have medical emergency kits. It's like having an urgent care and pharmacy in your home. Just fill out a brief online medical intake and your kit, prescribed by a licensed provider, is shipped to your door. Here's how to order.
Order your kit now and save $45. Visit urgentcarekit.com/news. That's urgentcarekit.com/news.
You thought you were booking a relaxing vacation, but hackers just booked a ticket into your private life. Your passport, your birth date, your identity exposed. PC-Matic, cybersecurity built by Americans for America.
Stop, check this out. Our most advanced performance frame, Talon, is out. It's a bestseller. We just got it back in stock, and I want to show you a little bit about it. This frame is an 8-base wrap, so it's going to sit close to your face, give you wide peripheral vision, stay on tight, but it also has a squared off lens for a versatile everyday look. And then you have comfort fit adjustable rubber nose pads for secure fit as well. These come with our signature lost and broken protection, and you can try them risk-free for 30 days. Check them out at shadyrays.com.
When threats to my life were particularly intense a few years ago, around the time of the Dobbs leak, my security detail sent me home with a bulletproof vest. My 12-year-old son was standing in the doorway of my bedroom, and he wanted to know what it was. I didn't expect that performing this service was going to put me in the position of explaining to my children what a bulletproof vest was and why I had to wear one. Many of us, me included, have received threatening, anonymous deliveries designed to intimidate and harass us.
That certainly doesn't sound good. That is Justice Amy Coney Barrett addressing the dangerous threats she is facing along with her family, as you have just heard, testifying next to the liberal Justice Elena Kagan in front of the House and Senate Appropriations Committee, pushing for nearly $230 million from Congress. That's $20 million more than last year over rising threats, most of it coming from the violent far left. The funds would provide an additional 6 agents per member of the court. Amy Coney Barrett was a victim of a swatting incident at her home in May. That's when a caller falsely reported gunshots and arguing to police, provoking a heavy response. Luckily, law enforcement quickly realized it was, in fact, a hoax, but it doesn't stop there. A deranged transgender woman, really a man, pled guilty last year to attempting to assassinate Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh 3 years ago. He's now in prison for 8 years, showing up at Kavanaugh's home. He was armed with a gun. He had ammunition, a knife, zip ties. What do you think was going through his head? Angry over the court's Roe v. Wade decision. Missouri Congressman Mark Alford joins us now to talk about it. Congressman, pleasure to have you on. Let's talk about it here. Some additional information that we have. This is according to the justices. According to U.S. Marshal Service, there have been 370 total threats to judges so far just this year. We still got a ways to go. None of this sounds good. Talk about what's going on with the judiciary and just the left, the relentless attacks against our judges here.
Bob, you're absolutely right. That's why we had this hearing. Look, we've already appropriated. We've already passed this bill. We gave them a big plus up. We really need to get these justices up to the level of protection that cabinet secretaries have. That is the goal. We're not going to get there overnight, but it's a far cry from where they were. They've had threats. They've had people showing up at their homes. We are trying to provide the money necessary through the appropriations process where they feel secure, where their families feel secure, and they're not going to be really in fear for their life. It is sad what this has come to, but that's the crazy left, right? You don't hear a lot about people on the right side, conservatives, threatening liberal justices. That's not the way we operate. But the crazy communist progressive left is intent on destructing our great nation. And they want to take down some of these Supreme Court justices. They want to expand the court, and if they can't do that, they're going to have their way.
Or maybe just tear the general, too. Yeah. I know that's part of their doctrine, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, they came out with that part of their platform, the Democrat Socialists. I call them communists, Democrat Socialists of America. They want to scrap the Supreme Court, not just expand it. We've got to provide the money. We're doing that. We're going to get them up to snuff and make them feel safe.
So let's talk about this, and I think this is what most of us are worried about now. So, I read out that a man tried to assassinate Justice Kavanaugh after Roe v. Wade. You have Amy Coney Barrett up there saying that she's got to wear a bulletproof vest home, and her son sees it, and she has to explain, what exactly is going on. There might be some worry once you hear that and you see Amy Coney Barrett up there testifying that do these decisions maybe get into their heads and maybe they don't make the decision they really want to because they're scared of things like this. Now, I'm not saying that's the case, and I certainly hope it's not, but it makes you wonder, don't you think?
Yeah, I don't really think. I think these are people of integrity. They have spent many years on the bench and in law before they got to the Supreme Court. But it is a consideration. I mean, we as congressional members, not that I have death threats against me every day like Supreme Court justices do, but you do take that into account. It doesn't affect how I vote. But it does kind of stick in your craw a little bit, and it affects your everyday life. I don't have young kids like Amy Coney Barrett, but when she has to go to the grocery store, what do? You're not going to take all the kids. It's stretching the details thin. We're going to plus up. We're going to give them more service members. We've also got to start looking at things like drone incursions. This new emerging threat you've seen with the drone escalation in the Ukraine-Russia war and other drone capabilities. We've got to be prepared for every contingency to protect our Supreme Court justices.
No, we really do. And also something that we learned today of and that was discussed about at the hearing, Congressman, maybe some Democrats, they want to implement an independent enforcement mechanism for the Supreme Court's ethics code. Maybe a panel of former judges, something that's being tossed around. This was Congresswoman Rosa DeLario talking about that.
A mechanism. Every other body has that. We have a committee, all the federal courts do. It's just the Supreme Court that doesn't, and it should come from the judiciary. And my hope is that be for the integrity of the court, the kind of morality that we need to have and that we need to demonstrate to the public about how important we take the roles that we have and that we're not somehow abridging the system or abusing the system.
The Congressman, I want to know, she has blue hair, so there's that. And then also, as we discussed, just chip away. Just keep chipping away at any way they can. And who do you think would be on that independent ethics committee, do you think?
Well, it would largely be composed of liberal Democrats, I'm afraid. Look, Rosa DeLauro is a friend of mine. She's a ranking member. She's an artist, very creative. That's why she has purple hair. I get that. But she's way off kilter on this. This is a clear separation of powers. We have Article I authority in Congress, and she is big on preserving that in the appropriations process. And if you want to preserve the authority of the Supreme Court, you need to leave them alone and let them govern themselves. We do not need to be putting restrictions, whether it's on the White House and their Article II authority or the Supreme Court. We are set up under the Constitution where they pretty much govern themselves, set their own boundaries, set their own parameters. And let's worry about us. Let's get our house in order first.
Congressman Mark Alford, sir, it's a pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Okay, an MS Now host gets triggered by Trump's White House press briefings. She says it's just too difficult for her to watch. She can't possibly bear hearing from the President of the United States. That is next on News from the Left.
I stopped carrying Sarah Huckabee Sanders' briefings. It actually hurt me.
I lost 110 pounds. You couldn't tell at all because of my excess skin. Sono Bello changed that in one visit.
Introducing the new Lift EX, the just one visit total body transformation everyone is talking about.
I am super happy with my results.
I decided to give Sono Bello a try. Look at me, I have a silhouette. You can see my waist.
Lift EX is Sono Bello's breakthrough 360-degree body lift alternative. Our body contouring experts sculpt, tighten, and lift your stomach, waist, thighs, and backside, all in just one visit with less downtime.
Sono Bello targeted the areas diet exercise could not do. I found me again.
Sono Bello has over 50,000 five-star reviews, and Lift EX is exclusively available at Sono Bello, America's #1 cosmetic surgery specialist. Book your free, personalized consultation today. Easy monthly plans make your best body more affordable than ever.
This year is my year thanks to Sono Bello.
Call Sono Bello for your free consultation today.
My dad has never been in better shape. He had a stroke and passed away. He had a life insurance policy. Ethos.com. In 10 minutes, you can be covered with life insurance.
Check your price today at ethos.com.
Attention! Do you owe money to the IRS? If you owe $10,000 or more, you must hear this message because new Trump-era tax policy changes are providing relief to the American taxpayer. IRS policy changes in 2025 and 2026 have created new ways to resolve debt. Tax Relief Helpers knows exactly how to navigate them and could help you save thousands. Just call 800-357-9528 to protect your assets, home, and retirement.
I owed $87,000 in taxes. Tax Relief Helpers got the amount I owed down to just $3,500. I saved $83,500.
I got behind on my taxes and I owed $48,000. I called, and after they told me about the changes at the IRS, they got my bill fully removed.
We save Americans millions of dollars in tax debt every year, and we can help you. Call right now to take advantage of the latest Trump-era tax deductions to protect your assets, home, and retirement from the IRS. The call and consult are absolutely free. Call 800-357-9528. That's 800-357-9528. Attention! Do you owe money to the IRS? If you owe $10,000 or more, you must hear this message because new Trump-era tax policy changes are providing relief to the American taxpayer. IRS policy changes in 2025 and 2026 have created new ways to resolve debt. Tax Relief Helpers knows exactly how to navigate them and could help you save thousands. Just call 800-357-9528 to protect your assets, home, and retirement.
I owed $87,000 in taxes. tax relief helpers got the amount I owed down to just $3,500. I saved $83,500.
I got behind on my taxes and I owed $48,000. I called, and after they told me about the changes at the IRS, they got my bill fully removed.
We save Americans millions of dollars in tax debt every year, and we can help you. Call right now to take advantage of the latest Trump-era tax deductions to protect your assets, home, and retirement from the IRS. The call and consult are absolutely free. Call 800-357-9528. That's 800-357-9528.
Now, tirzepatide for weight management is available in a dissolvable tablet. It's not the injection and doesn't offer the same strength or clinical evidence as the injectable form, and results will differ from the injection. But for patients who don't want shots, this tablet option is worth exploring. Understanding results will differ from the injection. Tirzepatide tablets are a prescription that starts with a telehealth evaluation by a licensed physician who reviews your health history. And if it's right for you, they prescribe it. This might be worth a conversation.
People always ask me how I stay ready, how I lock in when it actually counts. They think I must be on something. It's pure, it's potent, it's all me. Something that never lets me down. Armra, I'm on it.
All right, welcome back in. Time now for news from the left. MS Now's Nicole Wallace, known for her relentless and ridiculous anti-Trump segments, hosting former CNN reject Jim Acosta on her podcast. Good way to describe the guy. Wallace openly admitting that she refused to air White House press briefings during Trump's first term. Couldn't stomach it. Take a look.
I stopped carrying Sarah Huckabee Sanders briefings. Just refused to carry him because having worked there, it actually hurt me to watch her lying. And I'm not saying that every press secretary in every White House doesn't, try to get the best coverage they can or put the best possible light on the things that their boss is doing.
It hurt me to see Joe Biden falling down all over the place, but I still watched it. You see, and I would assume others, they weren't watching either like her, because if you're not on the left, you don't even deserve to be heard. That is really what she was trying to say. In that same interview, Wallace and Acosta actually said that they believe that they are down the middle independent journalists, which I find that quite surprising and comical. Take a look.
I feel blessed to be welcomed into the pro-democracy coalition, but I feel sometimes like I'm rooting for them more than they're rooting for themselves.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Democracy is our home, Nicole. That's
Right,
okay. I mean,
right.
I've never been registered with the political party. I've always been an independent. I've been a journalist. But, I mean, I think I see things clearly.
You know, in some warped universe, Jim Acosta actually does believe he is down the middle. Many of them do. That is what is so crazy. But all they know is the twisted coastal elite bubble way of life, so they can never relate to any other part of the country. And I say that all the time. Curtis Houck, managing editor of Newsbusters, joins us now. Curtis, Jim Acosta was down the middle the whole time. We just didn't know it. When did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, this is remarkable stuff, Bob. This is breaking news. I mean, I thought of Catherine Rampell, used to be at the Washington Post. Now she's at MS Now. A few years ago, during a debate with Scott Jennings, she said, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not an activist. I'm a journalist. And it's the same sort of thing. Nicole Wallace is one of the most brain-dead folks in the liberal elite media. She hosts her show Deadline White House, which I like to call Rich White Liberal Wine Mom Story Hour, because it's a perfect lens into the way these people view the world, Bob, where it's godless. Their lives revolve around Trump. You wonder, do these people have hobbies? Are they going to watch, the All-Star game tonight? In Philly? What do they do?
They're all stuck in that, like I said, this bubble here. They have no idea what is going on outside of, the Ivy League and the upper crust kind of society that they're in. It's crazy. All right, I want to move on to this. Sunny Hostin from The View. Her son, Gabriel, he got accused of trespassing on the North Metro railroad tracks in Westchester County, New York. This was back in June. The young man, Gabriel, he was spotted jogging along the MTA tracks in New Rochelle, ignoring the no trespassing signs, mouthing off to the cops when they questioned him. Sources saying that Sonny escalated the situation, allegedly got on the phone with police asking if they knew who she was, telling them that she's Sunny Hostin and that she's on The View. Now that, to me, should have been enough to have an arrest, but no, I'm kidding here. Now, according to court records obtained by TMZ, Gabriel was cited for the incident, not arrested. The court records also revealed The View, the co-host, listed as the lawyer where she argued dismissal would avoid imposing unnecessary consequences on a young man who has demonstrated exceptional character and achievement, who poses no risk to the community, blah, blah, blah here. What stands out to me is that she tried to use the I'm Sonny card here, like the police care. But that points you to the rules for thee, not for me.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wrote down here. Yeah, in my prep for this segment. That's exactly what the reality is. And by the way, that's not Sonny's real name. My colleague Nick Fondacaro would point out, you got to go look up her name. I don't want to mispronounce it, but that's not her real name, actually. Of course, she's going to do. Don't you know who I am? This is a woman who probably hasn't done her own grocery shopping in I don't know how many years. And, for her to throw I'm sure she threw the race card because this is what she does. I mean, just another negative headline for The View as they're dealing with the FCC.
Like, wouldn't you be embarrassed? I'd be so embarrassed if I was ever in a situation. I'd go, oh, I'm Bob Brooks from Newsmax. Don't you know who I am? It's ridiculous.
I mean, it's ridiculous. Anytime we hear a celebrity do this, I just think, what are they going through their head? They're just showing that they are the most arrogant person alive.
So arrogant. I'm going to start doing that. I'm Bob Brooks from Newsmax.
Don't you know who I am?
Don't you know who I am? You better let me do whatever I want. Whatever. Curtis Houck, always a pleasure, man. Good to see you.
Thanks, Bob.
All right, a European soccer star returns home from the World Cup with thousands of dollars worth of American souvenirs. One bizarre item, not what you would expect. I believe it's behind that question mark. Okay, find out what Erling Haaland took back.
When you're in the news business, it never stops. News is always breaking, and it's my job to get you the news, no spin, no BS. If you don't believe us, just watch us.
Watch Finnerty, weeknights, only on Newsmax.
Hi, I'm Sally with SellMyPolicy.com, the fast concierge service here to help you sell your life insurance policy for cash now. Our experienced team makes it fast and easy for you to get your offer. Use the money however you want. John sold his policy for $590,000 in cash for health care. And Cheryl sold her policy for $90,000 in cash and used it to supplement her retirement income. If you are over 65 with a life insurance policy of $100,000 of coverage up to $50 million of coverage, then you may qualify. With Sell My Policy, some people choose to sell all or just part of their policy so they can access cash now while also keeping coverage in place for their loved ones. Plus, you'll get paid fast. Trusted by seniors, there's no obligation to sell. Find out what your policy is worth today.
It's fast and free with Sell My Policy.
Talk with a policy expert now to see how much cash you could receive. Call 800-910-2274 or visit sellmypolicy.com.
Hey, I'm Dr. Drupinski. I've been a physician for 4 decades. I've been looking at the aging process for a long time, and Fatty 15 is one product that actually slows it down. Fatty 15 comes out of Navy dolphin research. A brilliant veterinarian realized that dolphins get disease much like humans. She looked at what predisposed to those problems, isolated the molecule, gave it to the animals, they didn't get the problem. Without the C15, our cells become fragile and age and oxidize. This pushes that back. Cell health equals physical health. That's why I take Fatty 15.
Thinking about a new building project? Only General Steel lets you see your project instantly, followed by pricing you can count on. Design your project in 3D or tell us your vision and we'll do the rest. Text PLAN to 59583 and we'll deliver a personalized design to your inbox in minutes. That's right, you'll see your project inside and out, complete with your customizations instantly. Architects charge thousands to capture your vision like this. Backed by decades of experience and thousands of successful projects, the General Steel design system gives you more than a price. It gives you a clear vision you can build on. Text PLAN to 59583 to create your own building or browse thousands of unique customer designs with new ideas published every hour. From personal shops to business expansions, see your new space inside and out down to the details. Get insulation tailored to your climate, paint colors that perform where you live, and expertly placed doors and windows that deliver access, ventilation, and natural light based on your unique needs. Text PLAN to 59583 to plan and price your project instantly with General Steel. That's PLAN to 59583 because if you need space, you need the General.
All right, before we go tonight, as the World Cup heads to the final week, fans are saying goodbye to the United States. World Cup tourists, many of who are from Europe, they're heading home with more than just soccer memories. Besides just a new perspective of the United States, they are leaving with suitcases full of souvenirs, including the athletes themselves. Norwegian soccer star Erling Haaland returning home from Texas after spending weeks in the United States. Haaland with his own sorts of a trophy here. So he went on to spend $10,000 on cowboy hats, cowboy boots, Western shirts, belt buckles, But the most interesting souvenir of his haul, this. A stuffed raccoon holding a liquor bottle costing him $750. I think that is pretty cool. Only in the United States do we have culture like that. And I heard for so many fans, Rob Finnerty, they had a blast when they came to the United States, contrary to the way we are portrayed by so many of those sick people on the left, you know?
Was that a guy?
It was.
That's a guy.
It was a guy.
For who? Switzerland?
One of the best soccer players in the
And when's the
world.
final match? This morning?
Like in a couple days.
I'm a huge fan.
I can tell.
Fan. It's been great.
I can tell.
It's been great. Bobby, we're going to leave it there. Finnerty starts right now.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.